Hello. Thank you for joining me for this devotion today from Gospel of Matthew, the fifth chapter, verses 10 and 12. We read, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you on my account, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Um, Search Institute in Minneapolis, Minnesota, asked 11,000 people um, from 561 different Protestant congregations the question, what constitutes a mature faith? They came up with an interesting list that repeated, and these are some of the things that they saw. Um, that the person would trust God's saving grace through Jesus Christ, that they would feel good about themselves and have a well-being, a security, a peace. They integrate their faith into their everyday life. They seek to grow spiritually by studying or reflecting prayer, discussion with others. They are part of a community of believers and witness their faith and support and nourish others. They're responsible for the welfare of others. And they advocate for social and peace and justice. And they serve humanity with love and justice. A good list. Five of those things involve seeing Christ in their neighbors. And um, in Matthew 25:40, we read, Jesus says, "When you did it unto the least of these, you did it unto me." So our faith, if we're mature in our faith, it's not only about us, it's how we affect others. We've looked at the Beatitudes and have been challenged by them. Just let me refresh the things that we talked about. First, we talked about blessed are the poor in spirit. Remember, those who humbly recognize that how much we need God. The second was those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn their sins, right? And third, we talked about meekness, how we need to offer ourselves unconditionally to God's service, commit our lives totally to God. Next, we talked about we want to learn in our faith and grow and hunger and thirst after righteousness, right? Then we talked about to live our to live our lives, our faith in a spirit of mercy, and then a genuineness, not being hypocrites, with a pure heart, and finally we talked about becoming peacemakers and reconcilers in our world. And then we come to this last beatitude, which is an almost, oh yeah, by the way, if you do the beatitudes, I just want to tell you, then you probably will be persecuted. Wow. Persecution isn't anything that anybody seeks, right? What kind of persecution can we expect if we live for Christ, if we follow the Beatitudes? The early Christians lived daily under a threat of persecution. A constant threat was always hanging over them. It took incredible courage to be a Christian in the early days. Um, Jesus made it very clear to them. He didn't come to make life easy for them. No, in fact, the opposite was true. It would take a great commitment for them to survive the persecution. Many of them lost their jobs. They were, if they were committed to their faith, they were persecuted, ostracized by society, kicked out of their homes, cast out of their families because they accepted Jesus Christ as Lord. Um, they were accused of cannibalism because of the words they used in the Lord's Supper. This is my body, this is my blood. The world around them twisted these words into a totally false story that Christians were sacrificing babies, eating their flesh. Cruel gossip, malicious slander. In addition, in their weekly meetings, they often called their meetings agape or love fests. You don't have to have much imagination to know what the world did with that. Early Christians were accused of scandalously having sexual immorality and all a lie. Um, but the Christians had to live with these false accusations. They were politically persecuted as well. The Roman emperor at that time made worship of the emperor compulsory. Once a year, people would have to come and burn incense in homage of Caesar. They would have to bow down and say, Caesar is Lord. And that's precisely what the Christians refused to do. Jesus Christ was their Lord. They would not compromise. The earliest Christian's creed was 3 words: Jesus is Lord. It also meant that Caesar was not. Um, and this got them into a whole lot of trouble. Some of them were burned at the stake, some were fed to the lions. William Barclay, a commentator in the commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, gives this graphic description. He says, Nero wrapped the Christians in pitch and set them afire and used them as living torches to light his gardens. He sewed skins of wild animals on them and sent his hunting dogs to tear them to death. He tortured, they were tortured on racks, they were scraped in pincers, they were molten lead was poured, hissing on them. The things that are not pleasant to think about, but these are the things that a man had to prepare for if he took his stand for Jesus Christ. Yes, they were politically persecuted, and they were personally persecuted. From the beginning, the followers of Christ were persecuted for righteousness' sake. They were reviled, they were attacked, they were slandered, they were falsely accused. And I know this still happens more subtly now. If we dare to love, if we dare to care, someone will raise a question: what is their motives? If you dare to tell the truth when falsehood appears, when you dare to do good, evil will rise up against you. That's the world that we live in. You do something Christian, and uh, it will prick the conscience of people who are not doing anything good, and they will wonder what you're doing and why you're doing it, and they will begin to say things that are not true about you. But the good news is that God and righteousness will ultimately win, and God will share the victory with us. But in the meantime, we need to stand tall for righteousness, unflinching, unwavering, uncompromisingly, and hold high our lives in justice and goodness, and trust God to bring forth the right. So believe in righteousness, dedicate your life to goodness, love justice, but understand you will probably be persecuted and slandered. And when you are persecuted and slandered, hold on to your commitment to God. Don't give up. Don't sell out. Hold on to your trust in God. Let me close with this quote from Corrie ten Boom. She was a prisoner of war in World War II. You probably know her from her book called The Hiding Place. This is a quote from her book. There is no pit so deep that God is not deeper still. And that's what this beatitude talks about. Come what may, we can trust in God. Let us pray. Gracious and loving Lord, I thank you. I thank you that you are a loving and caring God that we can trust in, even in times of persecution, even in times when people are saying things that are not true about us. We can depend on your goodness and your love, for in the end, your righteousness will win. The Lord, help us in times of difficulty. Surround us with your love and your grace. We'll thank you and we'll praise you for it.